matters. What I don't want to do, and this will be another discussion we didn't get into today, is how to pay for it. And if everything is paid for by a user fee, well then, the burden falls on working class folks who are having trouble.
President Biden there on one of the many challenges facing right now, the rising gas prices made even worse by that cyber attack on the Colonial Pipeline.
Yeah, but other prices are climbing as well. The Consumer Price Index climbed by 4.2% on an annual basis, fastest since 2008, but the highest since 1981.
Yeah, that there in CNBC. Let's welcome in our panelist. Rich Valdez is joining us, former Trump National Diversity Advisor and host of This Is America podcast. Mark Halperin, political analyst, joining us live as well. Mark, good to see you. And Rick Green, founder of PatriotAcademy.com. Thank you, gentlemen, all for joining us here. I want to play this for you before we get going on it. This is a clip of Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy responding to that report we just showed you about inflation. Watch this.
Those numbers we heard today on inflation, that should terrify every American. Because it's not a question of whether there's going to be a tax increase. You just had the biggest tax increase you've had in more than 10 years, and it hit you already.
Let's start with Rich Valdez. Your thoughts on that?
Well, Joe, break the bank. Biden's at it again, and he's living up to it. I mean, he's making the bread lines that Bernie Sanders talked about come to a reality. I'm being hyperbolic, but I think we're on our way. This is a terrible place to be, and you guys just cited the fact that this is the worst growth of inflation that we've seen since the 80s. This is a bad situation that we're in, and Joe Biden's just making it worse. And it almost seems as if he didn't know it was going to be this bad, and he's looking for a scapegoat. And I don't think he's going to find one with the general public. I think people that are looking at Joe Biden saying, let me give him a chance, I didn't like Trump's tweets, they're looking for a refund.
Yeah, this comes at a time when President Biden is trying to push his own infrastructure bill. Mark, that's expected to cost trillions of dollars here. Is there any chance that Democrats might be willing to go for a lower price at this point, meet with Republicans?
Emma, there are some Democrats who want that, but the balance of power in the party is about big spending, big tax increases on the wealthiest and corporations. And I think it's going to take a lot to take them off that track. However, their assumption was they'd be trying to pass this with the economy looking like it was firing on all cylinders. And as we've seen between inflation, between the stock market, between unemployment numbers, there's some doubt about whether the economy is going to be firing on all cylinders.
Rick Green, curious to know your thoughts on this.
Well, look, policies and elections have their effect, whether they're bad policies with bad effects or good policies and good effects. And we saw this coming. You can't throw $10 trillion on the market without having inflation. You can't tell people to stay home and not work and not be productive without having inflation. So we're looking at Jimmy Carter's misery index all over again, probably worse than what we saw in the late 70s. The good news is, as bad as this gets, it wakes up Americans. And just as bad as the rubble was from the Carter years, we rebuilt the nation from that with the Reagan Revolution. And I think we're seeing people begin to once again want another Reagan Revolution. That's a good sign.
Well, you mentioned Jimmy Carter. So before you get to potentially a future revolution, let's flash back in time. And the former president also brought up Jimmy Carter. He released a statement, President Trump, saying in part, quote, "I see that everybody is comparing Joe Biden to Jimmy Carter. It would seem to me that is very unfair to Jimmy Carter. Jimmy mishandled crisis after crisis, but Biden has created crisis after crisis." He seemed to note the difference there. Rich Valdez, what do you make of the former president's remarks?
Well, I think Trump nails it here. He's definitely spot on. Biden's got a crisis at the border. He's got an economic crisis, and he's got a crisis that's brewing in the Middle East. Trump had the Abraham Accords, and Jimmy Carter now is just saying, all right, guys, take it easy. Let's tamp it down on both sides. I think it's ridiculous, and I would laugh at it if it wasn't for the fact that people are dying in Israel, and it's very unfortunate. So I think Biden's taken the cake here, and he's worse than Jimmy Carter.
Mark Halperin, I've been waiting to ask you this specific question about Jimmy Carter. Why did Jimmy Carter's name get brought back up, and is it appropriate in your opinion?
Well, look, the Carter years were characterized by the then president, telling people that things weren't so great, that the country had some fundamental problems. And we generally like our presidents to be optimistic. Joe Biden's tried to be optimistic, but inflation is not something that a lot of Americans alive today have ever dealt with. And if we have a return of inflation, that's really the defining dynamic of our economy. I think people are potentially going to look back at the Carter years and wonder why we let this happen again through big spending.
People are already looking back on at least some more present day social media posts. In fact, this one that's sent out by our Vice President, Kamala Harris, tweeted back in April saying that brighter days are ahead. Now, Rick, I'm sure you can kind of see where we're going with this. A lot of people wondering, when are those days coming? As we pointed out, there are plenty of struggles going on right now for everyday Americans.
Well, the Democrats are great at creating crises. They're terrible at solving them, practically inept. And, just to speak to the comparison to Carter, the Carter years were so bad, most people that were alive at the time have blocked it out. I mean, the reason they created the misery index was for the inflation that was out of control and the interest rates that were out of control. And Jimmy Carter himself said America's best days were over. Don't forget the Iranian hostage crisis. 444 days they held our hostages, and he was completely inept at dealing with that. When President Reagan came into office, they were released. There's so many comparisons that are spot on. I just hope that Americans are waking up. If we taught history better, if we weren't so civically ignorant about our history, maybe we could stop repeating the negative periods in our history. It's the same with the racism. They're going right back in and repeating the racist Democrat game plan of years before. So it's up to us, the citizens, to wake up and prevent this from happening again.
All right, that is Rick Green, Mark Halperin, and Rich Valdez. Thanks, guys. We appreciate the political analysis. Good conversations.
Thanks, Emma.
You got
In
it.
just a bit, a live look at Israel's Iron Dome preparing to face